Hey Hunter, how's it going?
Hey, how are you?
Good. Yeah, maybe a little bit background to start. What are you building? How long have you been doing it? What's exciting about it to you?
Yeah, so we are building infrastructure and very specialized architecture for agentic systems. We can get into like what agentic really means at some point, but we've been doing it for a while now, at least relative to the space. We were very, very fortunate that we had a friend who was close friends with the higher ups at OpenAI. And so the very start of 2023, we got API access to, the latest and greatest of GPT. And I'll never forget just that first language model response back of just sending something. Because I had friends that had sent me like the previous versions where it basically tried to complete a list for you. And it
Hmm.
wasn't, yeah, I mean, it was interesting. You're like, okay, zebra, giraffe, and then it might give you back elephant. You'd be like, okay, that's cool. But this was such a step change difference where it gave you a complicated thought and reasoning and role played. Um, I mean, it was instantly I knew that I had to just basically drop everything and pursue whatever this was.
I felt that exact same way. My aha moment came later, probably in the last year or so, but just like, yeah, drop everything else and move on to this. Um, so I'm really interested because there's been a lot of ink spilled and a lot of debate over what constitutes an agent and what is not an agent. What's your take on that?
So, I mean, I have my definition of an agent, but I think it is. I more try to react to like where it just seems like people's own definitions are, and just trying to average out. Okay, this is typically what people mean, and I think what's safe to say is that the term agent, I like to think of it in the same way that the term athletic is used.
Yep.
It's on this kind of undefined spectrum of somebody goes from being not athletic to athletic at some point. There isn't a precise definition of what that is, or some like muscle density or hand-eye coordination. It just is kind of like, okay, this is an athletic person. And I think the same can be said with a software system. At a certain point, its level of autonomy is such that it is now agentic. We can disagree on what that threshold is when a system crosses into that, but I think it is just really, and I think as things mature, the difference between an agentic system and a non-agentic system will be very obvious to people.
Right.
I think it's just
Yep.
in like early stage, we are kind of at this like border threshold moment. And I think as the timeline goes on, it will be very clear. Okay, this is an agentic system and this is a deterministic one. It's just, we're not quite close enough to it yet.
Do you think the definition is going to keep shifting? Um, and maybe like everything that's agentic still is agentic. Like you never say that somebody who ran a 5 minute mile was not athletic, but certainly the bar for mile times continues to move, even if the amount that it moves shrinks.
100%. I think it's going to be, just like the mile time. It's like what it takes to impress you.
Yeah.
Will the goalpost will keep moving. And I think it's one of the funniest things about society today is just we could launch AGI, and I think Sam Altman has said this. You and I could launch a fully, like by everyone's definition, AGI system tomorrow, and 2 weeks later, people will have just like moved on and accepted, like, oh yeah, cool, yeah, we have AGI now. So I think it's just like our attention spans for being impressed are so short. But I think the definition of agent will just continually move forward, and it'll just be more about how autonomous is it, how flexible is it in the face of a differing scenarios, can it handle different stress tests, and like I said before, I think as we get further down that road, it'll be very obvious that a deterministic system could never handle whatever
Hmm.
scenario an agentic one handled. But yeah, I think we'll be moving along that path for a while.
I definitely feel that like it's moving so fast, right? Like I just I'm not sure there's a proxy for how fast the AI space is moving and how just globally people are involved in this. I wasn't around in the early computing days, but I look back at the timelines, and it's like 8 or 10 years for this cloud or computing to take over, and then maybe 4 to 6 years for cloud to take over, and AI, we're talking weeks and months here.
Yeah, I mean, I think the loops are just getting faster and faster, and I think it's not just the loops, but also the impact. And that's more the dangerous part, is to go from, hey, this is an interesting concept, to this has a real world impact. That is getting compressed and moving very fast as well. I mean, I sometimes have to remind myself constantly that 30 years ago, none of us had smartphones, and none of us but if you think about the net macro societal impact that a smartphone had, and just the net human behavior change that permeated all throughout the planet as a result of that. And it happened so fast in like the time horizon, like the scale of humans, like that was so abrupt.
Right.
So, and I think it's important to keep that in mind when you look at AI, because I think when you're in the weeds building stuff, you forget like this can actually meaningfully change not just businesses, but just human behavior itself. And I think we're going to see that. And if we thought mobile was a big impact to human behavior, I imagine AI will be 10x or 100x or even beyond that.
Yeah. What are some of the cool use cases that you've seen, or maybe they're not even built out yet, but people talking about in theory?
I mean, everyone kind of tries to throw this like personal assistant flavor on what AI can do for you. And I think like there is a huge proponent of that. Everyone getting time back, that's a great thing. And I'm not gonna, douse that as a high utility outcome. What I'm most excited about in terms of use cases, it's hard to really, put a fence around, but just the improvement of like net decision making across all people. I think when these systems are done well and stripped of bias and really just kind of mapped to how a person thinks through problems and just becomes a companion in thinking through things. Mm-hmm. I don't know what that impact looks like. And I want to say it's super positive that people just make better or just maybe just more informed decisions, right? If you can just magically do 2 weeks worth of research in 5 seconds and then be presented, a concise, like here's like critical information for whatever problem you're encountering. I think that the outcome is just better for everyone's, day to day. But that's, I know we want like a use case there, but that's kind of the outcome that I'm most excited about, and the use cases of just improving net decision making as you go about whether business or life or anything in between.
I was talking with a friend this week, and we realized, a small business doing $500,000 should be able to have McKinsey level consulting information. So
yeah, and I think that's, if McKinsey's value prop is to be believed, that information packaged in the right way is super valuable. And imagine you can like distribute that and everyone can have access to it, and all the way down to like actions like, do I get this pet food or this one? Like brand A or brand B. I mean, if you can really just like weave that into every aspect of your life, I have no idea what the kind of like societal impact of that is. But like I said, if done well, I think it's super positive, and I'm really excited for it.
That's cool. Tell me about Magma and what you're building there. So actually, what I want to connect it to is YC's latest call for startups. They basically said, stop making wrappers, start making more pipes and more infrastructure, which y'all are ahead of that curve. And what I saw was super cool.
Yeah. I mean, I'd love to take the angle of we were just absolute visionaries from day one, and we recognized immediately that infrastructure and actually putting the right architecture behind this is super important and not a gimme by any stretch of the imagination. But the reality is that we were just early to building agentic systems. So, to give you an idea of how early, one of the first things we built was a tool calling or function calling library, where we would just try and recognize, okay, the language model is trying to take an action, and we interpret that, and then we take the action on behalf of. So there was no
MCP.
Well, this was pre the APIs giving you tool calling.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And so, we've been like looking at this problem for a while, but what we kept running into is that while there's a ton of, chin scratching to be done on agent logic and prompting and context engineering, the infrastructure side, it was just such a recurring pain in our ass, just to put it bluntly. And it was just, it was like, this system requires slightly different infra than this system. And we want to, like, if you're doing voice to voice, you have to like care a lot about latency and how you structure handoffs. And then if you want to do multi-agent, it's like, okay, now we're like, as much as we love all these frameworks, it really just, if the infrastructure was solved, I feel like we could handle everything else. And so the first thing we did was like, let's take some inspiration, shout out to Next.js and Vercel and those guys. But let's just take some inspiration of infra as code and just define at this framework level, like the infra that you want to accompany your agent, because that was to us like the magic unlock, not necessarily anything in the agent logic. It was just like, boy, if I could get a webhook, like, or if I get long running tasks handled, or I could get this WebSocket to just like magically be available by just accompanying some of this. And we just felt like that was the right problem to solve for people, because I think the assumptions that a lot of people make or that we were seeing is that as if the agent logic part was just settled science and that there was a right or wrong way to do it. We were like, that's not the case at all. Let's get your agent online, and then you and your team can figure out what works and what doesn't. And because it's such a case-by-case basis, what's your fault tolerance, all these things. So we're like, let's just get out of the way and let people get agents online as fast as possible.
That's super cool. That makes a ton of sense. One of the things that I've been thinking a lot about is how, especially with like agentic coding, the relative costs change really quickly. And so the cost of application logic, basically goes to zero. And so the relative cost of infrastructure comes up a lot, even though the absolute cost maybe hasn't changed. So that's super cool to see y'all doing that. It's kind of magic.
One more thing I'll add there is that I think the reality is that you can't fully abstract it away either, because we do on like the enterprise version, we do give you kind of like full insights into what's happening. And I think different models, even there's different, slight architects thinking blocks, and you want to show that, and you want fast streaming latency for that, and then other things with long running. So we do have a kind of like a just generalized opinion on what we call it a Magma agent, and it has like what we think is like 99% of the time, this is the right infra, and you can get everything you need. But you can obviously extend that and take control of it, because there's a higher order opinion here that we have that, unlike the cloud era, which was like there still is a battle on, are we cool with our critical enterprise data living in a black box outside of our org? Take that 10 steps further and think about, are we cool with a black box making decisions on behalf of our business, and we don't know really why those decisions were being made, what was influencing them, right? And so we think it's going to become increasingly important for businesses to kind of come around to this idea that we actually need to be in control of these systems that are thinking and acting on behalf of our business. and just letting an open AI just make these decisions by default is not a way for us to build, lasting value or differentiated value.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like on the cloud side, like consensus was, oh yeah, we'll just put everything in the cloud, and then it's really come back a ways from that. And I realize that the center of gravity around that may be like nation states. But then on the AI side, everyone's just putting everything through LLMs with no checks and balances, no like I mean, better if they're running agentic coding in containers, but a lot of people are. So it's just that's got to get there for the space to mature.
Yeah. I mean, it's the speed, right? Like there's only so much hygiene that you can apply, and stay fast. But yes, 100%. I mean, not only are you potentially putting data that shouldn't be out there into these things, but like I said, I think what really comes down to it is that as businesses holistically become more agentic, by definition, the business itself, the actions that it's taking, I mean, right now it's like almost exclusively humans are the like end actors of a business.
Yeah.
But once, they become more agentic, these, you can almost say like OpenAI is running this business or Anthropic is running this business. And I think businesses will quickly wake up to be like, wait a second, maybe they're okay with it. Some of them might be, they might not care, but a lot of them will be like, we cannot have this for a lot of different reasons. So we need, kind of this, our own specialized approach. And, because at the end of the day, like Apple isn't, it's a result of a method. This is how Apple attacks problems. This is what we value in terms of domain expertise. And so to try and, layer that into some system that reflects that is going to be super crucial for brands like theirs to stay relevant and to stay, productive in AI, but retain those same qualities that make Apple.
So you're obviously skating to where the puck is. What can you share about where you're going? Where's the future of the architecture?
Well, okay, so I have been a big fan of just letting people roll up their sleeves and tinker away, and I still am. And I'm a sucker for just giving you the whole toy kit and letting you go crazy. But we've recently had a ton of success and excitement about this centralized, just general purpose agent that we call Nero, that is effectively a new interface for the Magma platform. And
can you just give a little background on what it is and what it does?
So you can think of Nero as like any of these, like generalized agents that are out there, Manus or to name one. But the difference is that we, in an experimental fashion, and I think we'll be launching this to a few people soon, we give it access to Vulkan, our agent builder. And what Vulkan does is in natural language, you just describe your agent, but instead of just ripping some random piece of code, it builds it into your org. It builds against our best practices. It builds into our architecture. It understands what integrations you have. So it really is just accelerates what's already there. But we gave Nero access to that and just treated it like any other agent. And I mean, the effects were wild, to say the least. I mean, it's truly like a Jarvis, like a build your own Jarvis, because in this paradigm, Nero is, you can think of it like a Claude Code sub-agent relationship, but this is just, instead you were just talking to Nero and saying, boy, I wish you could do this. And
then is it dynamically generating its own paths off of that?
Yeah. And so it's basically creating its own capability in real time. And, we kind of look at it like, well, you can kind of reframe the Magma platform to instead be the place to manage and optimize the capabilities of your main agent. And I think through that lens, anyone can just start talking in a very human way and just say, hey, I've got this, I'm planning this event. It's 100 people. It's in November. I want to, I have a budget of 10,000. can you help me plan this? And instead of it doing the typical chat GPT thing and just being like, here's a to-do list, good luck. It's instead, let me create a team of sub-agents for you to help you
Dynamically
do all this.
apply.
And the craziest part is we built an eval framework, right? To really like make sure that
Yep.
agents are behaving in the way that you expect them to. And I hate to admit this, but Nero just off the first draft was better at creating evals than
No kidding.
any one of us. And so it was able to basically create the agent, attach evals to it to like make sure that there was no nonsense and the thing that was actually and then we look at that and we're like, if you fast forward a little bit, there's something very interesting just about how people get their hands on agents, because all of that happened over a phone call. I had Nero call me, it has a phone number and an email and everything. And we were just watching kind of all of this happen in the logs. And we're like, okay, this is interesting. And this is kind of a reframing of everything that we're doing to just give people the power to kind of create the agent that they want exactly.
That's amazing. So there's two things I want to draw on. First is just I think, and I'm not like I'm not sure I have conviction on this, but like it's interesting how much like I've seen people posting content about like they don't even type their prompts anymore; they just speak them because it's faster. The other thing is I think like people knew that you could single shot agents, and there was sort of like this understanding that eventually you would have an agent that could be pretty good at finding its own path forwards. I didn't know it was coming so soon. That's really cool to hear.
Yeah, and if you know what you're doing, I mean, you can basically one-shot everything.
Mm-hmm.
The trick is, can we get it to a place where the most non-technical users can still get to where they need to get to, especially over like a medium or a modality like voice, where it's just so human, it's so natural. But yeah, I mean, it was I would say one of the craziest moments in technology for me. Just watching that, and because I was thinking, if I could show this to Hunter 5 years ago, you would not believe for a second what was happening. So it's an amazing place to be in that regard.
That's super cool. So kind of relating back to a previous thought, I think one of the things that I am against consensus on is that the model subsumes everything. I think there's a benefit to having the reasoning instantiated above the model level. One is that visibility and trust, and you can form it around like to reflect your organization, kind of like you're talking about earlier. So you can tune in them. So the other thing is that you can bring in a lot more builders too, so that all of a sudden people can become operators of their own agentic systems rather than just needing somebody else to do that work.
Yeah, I mean, we couldn't agree more on that point. And I think it's actually the implications of not agreeing with it are far scarier than I think people think about. Because what you're really saying is that these models will soon become the domain experts on everything. And then if a business's job is to have like domain expertise on something and deliver a service or good based on that, then what role is that our business is really playing in a world like that? I think what's much more likely, and what I think we're seeing already, is that they're pretty good and they're pretty adaptable and they're pretty useful, but there's a lot of work that goes into kind of augmenting it with your company's or your personal domain expertise on the problem. And by fusing the default model capabilities with that kind of added layer of methodology or domain expertise, that yield is effectively kind of your AI native way of solving problems. And I think that's the approach we've taken with Magma, where you could look at each agent or sub-agent is like an intelligence node or something. Like here's how you solve a certain problem, or here's domain expertise on the certain something. And without the actual human, addition of that domain expertise, then all you're getting is whatever OpenAI or Anthropic has already captured, and then what lasting value do you really produce as a business there?
What would you say to businesses who are aware that they need to make the transition but aren't sure where to start?
Well, you're in good company. I think there's an old adage that's anything that makes you fast, you rent, and anything that makes you differentiated, you build yourself. And I think you can extrapolate that out pretty well to AI. Anything that's just like a productivity gain, you can probably just, whatever tool feels right, grab it off the shelf and try a bunch, and some of them will work for you. But anything that like actually captures the essence of like what your business is about, you should really own that in as an AI native way as possible, because you just have to assume that the model train continues to move forward. And if you're just kind of relying on ChatGPT or the native expertise, like I've said, then it really is just a matter of time for you. Yeah. It's it is what it is. That's the world we live in now.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. Great conversation. Where can people find you?
Yeah. So we are currently, you can find our product at magmadeploy.com. And we have an experimental version of Nero that you can try, nero.pompeilabs.com.
I have no vested interest in this, but it was an incredible experience using the product. It just worked right out of the box. I had some trouble with some other more well-known framework trying to use their cloud infrastructure and having it be just really fiddly. So go check it out. Hunter, thanks for hanging out. I really appreciate it.
It was a pleasure. Thank you for trying the product. I'm glad you had a great experience, and I look forward to future conversations. Cheers, Stephen.
Absolutely. See ya.